Last week, we began trying to make sense out of situations that seemed to make no sense. We were seeking to know the answer to the question of why, or what if bad things happen to good people? And we were seeking to answer the underlying question, why, God? Why do you let that sort of thing happen, God? Why don't you let good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people, God? And we explored this by looking at the book of Habakkuk. And we saw Habakkuk's complaint, and we looked at it and how God answered his complaint and responded to his complaint, followed by Habakkuk's dismay. Because God's answer, God's response to his complaint wasn't what Habakkuk wanted. Does that at all sound familiar to you? Anyone else ever been there? Where we are in a situation and we ask God, why is this happening? And his answer just doesn't satisfy us. Well, God's second answer is to assure Habakkuk that he still is in control, that he still is in charge. And then Habakkuk finally responds in faith. Instead of responding in faith, sometimes it's easier for us to just put on a happy face when bad things happen to us. We just put on a happy face when bad things happen to good people, even though inside we're being torn up, even though inside it's just eating us alive. It's easier just to smile, and people will think that you're so strong, and you're handling it so well, and so on and so forth, when inside you just want to scream out, why, God? You see the wicked getting ahead, maybe at work, in the workplace, people who are willing to make compromises to moral principles, they get ahead, they get promoted, they get moved forward, and the righteous, well, they don't. They're under assault, it would seem. But when it happens to somebody else, and we're just serving in a supporting role, it's easy to say, oh, it'll be okay. Oh, just have faith. Oh, you'll get through this. God will help you. You'll do better next time, and so forth. But how about when it's really bad? How about when it's really bad and your faith is under a full-fledged assault by Satan? And you can't just put on a happy face because there's nothing in you that would allow you to, and you want to give up. What if it's not just a promotion at work that you're denied, but when the time comes, they call you in and they tell you, I'm sorry, we're going to give the promotion to Johnson. No, and by the way, we're downsizing. You'll need to find a new job. What about when that happens? What about when the absolute worst thing that could possibly happen to you happens? What about when a loved one is taken before his or her time, as we reckon time anyway? As a minister, I find myself dealing with people in this situation often. They've lost a loved one. Maybe it was a parent. Maybe it was a spouse. Maybe it was a child. Maybe it was a miscarriage. Maybe it's a struggle with infertility. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's that. There's many number of different things that it could be. But they lose a loved one tragically, and as a result, they are tempted to, and in some cases do, lose their faith as well. I know what I'm supposed to say to them. I really do. I know the right words, I think, and I know the 7 stages of grief and how to help them work through each of those 7 stages. I understand all of that. Excuse me. But sometimes, though, as I'm seeking to help them work through that, the statement will be made, well, preacher, you just don't understand. You've never lost your wife or husband. You've never lost a son or a daughter. Or they'll tell me, your mother and father are still alive. How could you know? How could you help me get through this time and what I'm experiencing right now? And I can have sympathy for them, but I can't have empathy because, well, my spouse still is alive. My daughters are healthy. My parents, even though they're getting up there in age and have some health things and so forth, problems and so forth, they're still relatively healthy. I can't say that I know exactly what they're going through, but then inevitably, we'll be talking and trying to work through these things, and they'll ask, well, when have you ever lost someone that is even close to your own age? When has that ever happened to you? And when have you lost someone that you've known for most of your life? And there are times when silence is what's required. Because really, when they ask that question, they don't really want me to launch into a dissertation. What they want is just somebody to listen to them. And so that's what I do. But this morning, I want to share with you a personal example. Because I've been there. And I'm going to tell you how I've been there. Let me ask you a question. How many of you remember what you were doing on Wednesday, December 18th, 1991, at about 9:15 in the evening? I know some of you are saying, I wasn't even alive then. Okay, I get that. All right, I understand. For those of you who were alive in 1991, what were you doing on Wednesday, December 18th, 1991 at 9:15 p.m.? I remember exactly what I was doing. I was preparing for my last semester exam for the fall semester of my senior year at Oklahoma Christian. Very exciting time. I don't exactly remember what the subject was that I was studying, but as a senior Bible major in the second to last semester of school, it probably had something to do with the Bible. Just a hunch, okay? But anyway, my engineering major roommates or apartment mates and biology pre-med apartment mate were also hard at work studying. They're probably studying harder than I was, but that's okay, because, hey, that's what they wanted to do. So anyway, nothing unusual was happening. Nothing unusual that would make this date and this time stand out in my mind, probably for the rest of my life. But then the phone rang, and my night started to get memorable. You see, nowadays, everybody has their own telephone, don't they? Yeah. Everybody's got their own cell phone and so forth and all that. That's all well and good and wonderful. But way back there in 1991, we didn't have our own cell phones, and in my apartment that I was living in, there was one telephone, it had one phone number, and all four of us that lived there would get calls on it. Okay, that's the way it worked before cell phones, okay? I know that some of our younger people don't understand that. That's okay. But anyway, one of my roommates answered it, and then asked, does anyone know a James Michael McClelland? And at first, I didn't recognize the name. Because to me, he'd always been Jim. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I want to share with you a little story about Jim and I growing up. Because you see, Jim and I were destined to be best friends. Let me share with you why I can say that with complete confidence. We were born 2 days apart, I never, ever let him forget that I was 2 days older than him. Never. But anyway, we were born 2 days apart in the same hospital in Abilene, Texas. Now, you're saying, well, so what? There was somebody born 2 days after me in the same hospital, and that didn't mean anything to me. I don't even know the person. Okay, I understand that. But we were born 2 days apart in the same hospital in Abilene, Texas. We were both placed for adoption with Christian Homes of Abilene, which is now Christian Homes and Family Services. We were both adopted by parents who lived in San Antonio, Texas, and attended the MacArthur Park Church of Christ. Is it starting to get weird for you yet? Okay. Now, so we both attended the same private school where each of our mothers was employed. At least he attended until 7th grade when he decided he had to go play football. So he went back to public school, and I stayed at Christian Heritage until finishing my 9th grade school year, when that was as high as it went. So I then went back to public school. We didn't go to the same high school though. We lived in the same general part of San Antonio, but it was in the same school district. But we went to different high schools, rival high schools. Somewhere along the way, Jim had gotten hurt playing football, and he had become a student trainer for his high school's football team. I was playing soccer at my high school, and there was a sequence of events that took place that I said I was playing high school. I was sitting on the bench in soccer. That's neither here nor there. Anyway, where was I going? Oh yeah, I was a student trainer as well. So we would talk before we played each other, schools played each other, and so forth. We graduated in the same building, 2 nights apart. I was in the top 10% of my class of 550 students. He was slightly lower in his similarly sized class. After graduating from high school, I went on to Oklahoma Christian to begin preparation for my career in ministry, received a BA in Bible, Bachelor of Arts degree in Bible. That means you have to take Greek. Anyway, Jim somehow managed to squeeze 2 years of junior college into 3 and was working as a security guard. And I always would laugh at him and make fun of him to his face because he was working security in an establishment that he wasn't even old enough to go into. Okay? Anyway, I asked him how he did that. He said, well, I just walked the employees to their cars after their shift ends and so forth. And okay, whatever. But anyhow, brings us to December of 1991. On December 9th, I was at my social service club's Christmas party. In fact, not only was I at my social service club's Christmas party, I had planned it because I was vice president of the club, and that was one of my responsibilities. And I was doing my in-charge things over here, and one of my brother club members came over and said, hey, Carl, somebody wants to see you at the door. And I'm, uh-oh, what did we do wrong? You know, it's not an employee of the school, is it? No, okay. So I went over, and there stood Jim. Now, right when I saw him, I knew something was wrong. And you know why I knew something was wrong? Because Jim was a proud Texan. And as much grief as I had given him about working security in an establishment that he wasn't old enough to get into, he had given me that much grief right back about not being a true Texan because I was going to school in Oklahoma. Okay? I know you probably may not understand the Texas-Oklahoma rivalry and so forth. I'm sure Arkansas has some big rival, Auburn or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, but the point is, he would kid me about that. And that was fine. We'd go back and forth. It was all in good fun. But anyway, I knew something was wrong. And so I brought him into the party because I was in charge of the party and I could invite him in and he didn't have to pay. So that was fun. He stayed at the party and I introduced him around to some people and he was talking with them. And while he was talking with them, I went to talk to Monica. And I said, hey babe, when we go back to our apartments, I need you to call my parents and find out why Jim is really here. Because he told me he just wanted to see me, and I'm kind of like, yeah, right. I'm going to be home in a couple of weeks anyway for Christmas break. You don't drive 500 miles to see somebody who's going to be back near you in a couple of weeks. Well, anyway, she did. After we went home, she went back to her apartment. I took Jim back to my apartment. And she called my parents, then they called his parents, and then my parents called Monica back. And so after talking with my parents that second time, Monica called me and said, it's time to say goodnight. I said, okay. We always would meet in a courtyard. They had there between the men's apartments and women's apartments. And as I was walking out the door, Jim was walking behind me. I said, whoa, 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 where are you going? He said, I'm going to go with you. I said, no, you're not. I'm going to say goodnight to my fiance. I don't need a chaperone. And so he sort of laughed and okay. So anyway, so he stayed in the apartment with my roommates and all, and I went down and talked to Monica. To make a long story short, I know too late, Jim had run afoul of the law and was supposed to be at his grandparents' in Coleman, Texas, just south of Abilene. He was in a truck that was a very nice truck. In fact, it was a brand new truck. And there was a good reason for that. He had taken it on an extended test drive from the dealership in Coleman, Texas. And so that was all my parents knew at that point. And so they had given Monica some advice to give to me. Keep an eye on him. Don't ever leave him alone. And get him out of your apartment as soon as possible. That was a Friday night. Jim also had picked up some bad habits that you aren't allowed to do in Oklahoma Christians' facilities. And so that night when it came time for him to feed that habit, I told him you have to leave campus all the way in order to do that. He said, well, that's silly. I said, no, it's not. That's the rules. I don't want to get charged money because you smoked in my apartment. I'm not going to do it. Okay. So he walked to the edge of campus, the property there and everything. And, while he was gone, I explained the situation to my roommates and told them, don't let him out of your sight, keep an eye on your stuff, and don't ride anywhere with him in his truck. One of them said, well, I've already done that, so don't do it again. Anyway, while I was saying goodnight to Monica, he had to go to the store, and Jim said, oh, let me drive you. And so they drove, and anyway. Again, that was a Friday night. He stayed through the weekend, went to church with us on Sunday, to the congregation where I was working as a youth minister my senior year. While we were there, I gave him one of my business cards because I was really proud. I said, Jim, I got a business card. You don't have a business card, do you? No. Okay. So I gave him one and had a good time with that. And he sort of blew it off. Like, what am I going to do with this? I said, just keep it. You never know when it'll come in handy. And so I put it in his billfold. Sunday night after church, we went to supper and came back to my apartment. And I said, Jim, you have to leave tomorrow morning. He said, why? I said, because if you don't, they're going to start charging me for you to stay here. You see, we're not allowed to have this sort of thing happen. And we've gotten this far because one of my roommates is the RA, and the person in charge of that part of our apartment, the apartments, is my club's sponsor. So they've been a little lenient with us here, but besides that, my roommates and I have finals coming up. We got to start preparing for them and so forth. And he left on Monday morning, December 9th, 1991. And that was the last time I ever saw him. That brings me to 9:15 p.m. on Wednesday, December 18th, 1991. What happened after Jim left me is he had gone back to Coleman. And when he got to Coleman, guess what? He was arrested for stealing the truck. While he was in jail in Coleman, he had had a talk on a number of occasions with some of the elders of the church there in Coleman. His grandfather had talked to the car dealer. Coleman's a very small town and all, and they agreed that the car dealership would keep his old truck and could sell it for whatever they could get for it in exchange for the mileage he put on the new truck and so forth. So there were no charges filed as far as that goes. But there was still the issue of what had happened with Jim in San Antonio. Jim had jumped bail on those charges. And in the course of their discussions with Jim, the Coleman elders had convinced him that he needed to go back to San Antonio and face the charges. And so he was supposed to do that. They had bought him a bus ticket. Gave him some spending money, I imagine, for the trip down. The plan was he was going to ride the bus to San Antonio. His mother would pick him up at the bus station. They would go to dinner somewhere, and then she would take him to the police station and he would turn himself in. Jim never showed up in San Antonio. Somewhere between Coleman and San Antonio, he had gotten off the bus and didn't get back on the bus. And somehow, someway, he had found his way to Montana, which brings me to the phone call. Does anyone know a James Michael McClellan? Oh, wait, that's Jim. Yeah, I do. Hello? Do you know a James Michael McClellan? Yes, I do. Can you tell me his parents' phone number? I said, I don't know if I can tell you his parents' phone number. He said, well, this is Sergeant, Detective, something, so-and-so with the Montana Highway Patrol, and I need his parents' phone number. I said, well, I don't know if I can give you his parents' phone number. He said, well, let me tell you what's happened. And somehow Jim had found his way to Montana. He had taken a truck on a test drive and gotten the dealer out of the truck and had led police on a high-speed chase. I want you to think about this for a moment. A boy who'd never been out of South Texas, mid-December in Montana. He somehow crossed, they don't know if he did it on purpose or if it was just he lost control, but he crossed the median and ran head-on into an 18-wheeler. And they needed to notify his next of kin, which would have been his parents. I said, I think I'll give you his phone number now, their phone number now. After I did, the man said, thank you for your cooperation, and so on and so forth, and went through another spiel that he had to by law. And when that was finished, I said, I'm curious. Why are you calling me? They said, well, when we retrieved Mr. McClellan from the truck, he had two things of identification with him. He had his fingerprints, and he had your business card. It's almost 22 and a half years ago. I should be able to get through this. On December 23rd, 1991, I attended the funeral for my best friend growing up. That made for a long Christmas break, it really did. That made for a lot of downtime to wonder, why, God? Why? And I tell you this, just to let you know that I've been there. As a senior Bible major, one semester away from graduation, I've been there. I've been there and I've questioned God's plan. I've been there and I've questioned God's timing. And I've been there and I've questioned God's purpose. I understand how the tragic death of someone close to you can eat away at your faith. No, Jim wasn't a family member, but I've known him for all but 2 days of my life. To this day, I wonder, what if I had done something different? Would or could there have been a different outcome? And I also understand that while things will start to make sense a little later, they'll never make total sense. At least not in this life. But some sense can be made. I know that takes a little longer than I planned on it, so let's move right on and look at a personal solution that I found. Some scriptures that help me. I mean, I was a Bible major. I'm bound to tie this into the Bible, right? John 14, verse 9 tells us, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. What this tells us is by looking at how Jesus handled a situation, we can see how God handled a situation. How Jesus responds is how God would respond. And by doing so, we see that God really does care about us, even in times of grief, perhaps especially in times of grief and mourning. John 11:35 tells us Jesus wept. Jesus wept. Two simple words that reveal so much to us about the character of Jesus and thus the character of God. Why did Jesus weep? Well, if you know what John 11 is about, it's about Lazarus. Lazarus has died. He's going to the tomb and he wept. But think about it. Did Jesus not know what he was about to do? Did Jesus not have a plan? Did he not know that he was about to go and raise Lazarus from the dead and that everyone's grief was going to turn to celebration? Well, I think he knew exactly what he was going to do. But Jesus wept because Jesus' heart was touched by people's grief. So much so that the Greek text tells us he literally burst into tears. So much so that the Jews said, see how he loved him. Turn to a passage like Hebrews 4:15. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with us in our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. Jesus has experienced every possible human emotion. He experienced sorrow with the death of Lazarus. He experienced anger when he was clearing the temple. He experienced frustration time and again with his disciples. He experienced joy. He experienced happiness. Any emotion that you can think of, Jesus has experienced it. And what that tells us, quite simply, is that God does understand. How does God understand? I mean, yeah, we understand Jesus, and you see Jesus, you see God. But when did God ever lose someone close to him? You ever hear of the Garden of Eden? When mankind chose separation from God over fellowship with God? You ever hear of the cross of Calvary, where God watched his only begotten Son die the cruelest, most inhumane death that man has ever been able to come up with? We look at a passage like 2 Corinthians 1, verses 3 and 4. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. Folks, not only does God care, and certainly he does, but he also understands. And as one who cares and understands, he also provides comfort for us if we will just look to him. One more passage, Job 15, verses 11 through 13. One of Job's friends say to him, are God's consolations not enough for you? Words spoken gently to you? Why has your heart carried you away, and why do your eyes flash, so that you vent your rage against God and pour out such words from your mouth? Excuse me. You've heard of the patience of Job, right? And we talk about the patience of Job. Let me tell you something. There came a time in Job's story where Job was beginning to lose his patience. Job was beginning to doubt God's care and doubt God's concern. Job failed to see God's comfort. And so a friend says these words to Job to remind him that God is not the source of trials, that God is the source of strength in the midst of trials. Now, if you look a little earlier, though, in the story of Job, you find what we're somewhat more accustomed to when we talk about Job. If we look at his story after his first test, he's lost everything. His oxen, his sheep, his camels, his children. Notice his response in Job 1, verses 20 through 22. At this, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. Did you catch his response? He fell to the ground not in anguish and sorrow, but in worship. After his second test, he's lost all those things, and now he's lost his health. He's covered in sores from head to toe. His wife even tells him to give up. But in Job 2, verses 9 and 10, Job rebukes his wife and says, his wife said to him, "Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die." He replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" The point is that after each test, Job focused on the positive. And it wasn't that he wasn't mourning his loss and grieving his loss of his possessions, his children, his health, and other things. He was. I think it was simply he chose to see the blessing side. He had these things to lose. God had blessed him with them for a time. As a side note, we need to understand and know that it was Satan who was responsible, not God. Job 1, verse 12, Job 2, verse 6, Satan goes to God, and God brings up Job, and Satan, he does get permission from God to test Job and to try Job. Satan's the one that's responsible. Remember 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has seized you except what is common to man. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will also provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. See, not only does Satan have to get permission from God to test Job, he has permission from God to test us. And God is never going to let us get in a situation where we are forced, where we are trapped, where we have to sin, where we have to give into the temptation. But perhaps the greatest source of help to me in dealing with Jim's tragic loss of life is the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, Luke 16, 19 through 31. You remember the story, don't you? Rich man had anything and everything he could possibly want. Lazarus, poor beggar, laid at his gate to beg. Rich man never gave Lazarus anything, even the time of day. Doesn't care a thing about it. They both died. And the rich man, or Lazarus, is taken to paradise. The rich man to Hades. They can see each other. The rich man says to Abraham, "Have Lazarus dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I'm in anguish and agony." And Abraham says, "Sorry, buddy. There's an uncrossable gulf between us." I want you to notice quickly what the rich man says after that in verses 27 and 28. He says, "Then I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers. Let him warn them so that they will not also come to this place of torment." Do you see his concern for his still living relatives? regardless of what happened, Jim did not and does not want me to lose my faith. Your loved one, regardless of, no matter where he or she is right now, they don't want you to give up. They don't want you to lose your hope. They don't want you to lose your faith. Hebrews 10:39 says, we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who believe and are saved. And regardless of their situation right now, that's what they want for you. They want you to believe so you can be saved. I don't want you to have a pity party for me about my friend Jim. I don't want you to feel bad. I just wanted to share with you these things to let you know that I've been there. I know what heartbreak is. I know what it's like to lose somebody that you've known for most of your life. No, I've never lost a spouse at 50 years. I understand that. But I have lost someone so special to me. And I understand, but more importantly, I want you to know that God understands. God understands what you're going through. And maybe what you're going through, you need help with right now. He'd like to help you. He'd like to pray with you and then do things physically to support you through these rough times. All you have to do is ask. Because that's what family's for. Maybe you're not a part of the family. Maybe you haven't put on Christ by being immersed in water for the forgiveness of your sins. If that's your situation, there's no better timing right now for you to do that. We'd love to witness that this morning. Regardless of your situation, if things aren't right between you and God, make them right. And if we can help you through a public response, why don't you come to the front now?